All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the sessions of How To. I'm very happy to see you all here. It's a great distance, but luckily we have the internet. And with the internet, we were thinking of doing something very simple, very needed, as I've talked to a lot of people. So this is the first circular design how-to sessions, and I'm very happy to see you all here. My name is Markus, Vihma. I'm circular design and circular economy advisor at the Estonian Design Centre. And I know quite a lot of you already, but there's some new faces as well. Can you please, there's a reaction button at the bottom of your screens. Can you tell me how many of you were participated in the, let's say, May's Train the Trainers sessions, workshops, where a lot of people already met? I see Mitsu was there, Tapani was there. So I see. All right. Dia was there, Joel was there. Nice. So this is already a small group of friends, we see. For the others, the Train the Trainers network is something that we initiated in May as well, and talk about circular design and the tools and methods that we have developed so far. Well, that aside, the most interesting part was actually the last 30 minutes after every day, where people who were really interested remained and continued talking about circular design and really what's happening in the work and what intrigues them, what puzzles them, and what they would like to work with. So as this conversation were open, honest, and interesting, we thought hey, why not continue this? Let's not talk about the concepts for a while. Let's not talk about what circular economy could mean and should mean and how everyone should and could act in the future somewhere in the vague abstract sense. So we're thinking of talking with professionals to how to really design and what does it mean to work on a circular design project. So the first in a series is a good example of what we're going to see each month. And we hope to see different designers, different circular economy experts talk about their work. Each time, one designer and one circular economy expert in terms of analytics or other skill sets or environmental analysis. So this is it's an open platform for everyone that I would like to, if anyone is interested to speak and talk about their experience, are welcome to later on. This session today is, as you see, it's held on Zoom. So technical details. This is a video call. Feel free to unmute yourself, mute yourself, raise hand, chat in the chat box. And so everything is open and we are all equal in the sense there's no hierarchy. There's everyone is there to join at any time, any given time. We will have a next one of such seminars roughly in a month. I will announce it, so stay tuned, don't worry about that. And today, which is actually the most important thing, is that we have two speakers today. We have invited Marilu Valente from Germany to talk about her experience with circular design. And she's the co-founder and father of Cyclic Design. And probably you have all seen this, one of her projects in some or other presentation about I'm terrible at pronouncing it, probably, Nepenthes bottle of a monomaterial bottle, sustainable circular bottle for household chemicals. And Marilu will talk about the design hurdles and the development process of it. And as a second speaker, we have, Marilu, you were in Germany, in which city?
I am based in Leipzig.
Leipzig, yes. And from Tallinn, we have Harri, who is the program director of SCI, Stockholm Environment Institute, who is a PhD basically in circular economy already before it was called circular economy. And today he will be talking about the analytical backgrounds of the systems thinking and the life cycle thinking that is necessary to implement or scale a circular design project in the example of he has worked with. Hi, Harri. Is that correct? Did I describe it correctly?
Yes. I'm going to present something that we did together with Markus, actually, the project. So you have been involved even maybe more. So you are also most welcome to contribute.
And so everyone is, stay tuned. It will roughly take 1 hour with those presentations and talks. And we will stay in tune after that as well. So there's, we're not going to be very strict on time. If the conversation carries, then it carries. That's what we're all here for. And should you have any comparable experience, that's the place to share them as well. We are here to figure out what it actually means to design for circular economy and to what it actually means in practice from our own experience. Marilu, I would like to give the word to you, and luckily, and as you described, in midst of all the internet sessions, you will not actually have any slides to share, which is absolutely brilliant. And I really like, you can actually, we have a very weird hybrid version of a digital seminar or session where you will actually be showing physical products, but from Zoom call. So can you talk a little bit about what's the topic today and why did you choose it?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Markus, for the introduction. So yes, as you mentioned, so today, I mean, I don't have like this speech on the product that I am developing, but I wanted to rather talk about my experience to develop a circular product and how I basically brought it from idea to reality. And so just to share my experience with you, with the audience, because I saw that quite a lot of you have already knowledge about the topic. So that's why, and it's going to be very focused on the product that I'm developing. And so, yeah, so feel free to stop me at any time, you know, if you have questions. So I'm happy to answer and further the conversation. So anyway, so hello everyone, and first of all, maybe I can share with you how I ended up into circular design, because actually my background is in architecture. I actually have a master in architecture, and I've worked in this field for 7 years, and actually from the beginning I was always interested in sustainable architecture and how, you know, you can maximize energy consumption in a building, or how you can maximize natural ventilation or lighting inside a building. But then, you know, after a while I realized that I wanted to design things that we interact with on an everyday basis. Okay, also buildings we do, but I wanted to design things at a smaller scale, and that's and something that would be realized in a faster pace, because we know that to realize a building it takes ages. And I had a lot of experience with LCA, also because I have been working with Siemens on a software that basically calculates carbon emissions from a city using an LCA software. So from the early, from my early professional experience, I was near this life cycle approach, so I could apply the same thinking to my design process, basically. And that's actually what I based my design, all my products design on. So I will start specifically to talk about my product, because I have started by looking at waste, several types of waste streams, and the main waste streams that I am focusing on now is the plastic waste topic. And, you know, I did a lot of research into this topic, and of course this problem comes, you know, has a lot of causes. And one specific cause that I have tackled is inefficiency inside the recycling process. And that comes from the fact that current plastic packaging is composite. So for instance, if we look at the existing shampoo bottle, so I don't want to do any brand advertising. So it's made with different components. So you have the body that you can squeeze, and usually it's made with high density polyethylene. And the cup, it's stiffer that you can, you have to open and close. That's made with polypropylene usually. So if you want to recycle this entire bottle, you need to separate the components. Otherwise, one material contaminates the other. And the secondary raw material that comes out of the recycling process is not as high value or is not pure. So I was thinking, okay, so how can we combine these two components into one? And I was thinking, okay, how we can combine the closing mechanism with the body of the bottle. And that's how the design of the Nepenthes bottle came up. Actually, so Markus, it's pronounced Nepenthes, but it's okay.
And this is the actual bottle that you're holding?
So this is a 3D printed prototype.
Mm-hmm.
I will show you some other prototypes in a while. So yeah, as you can see, the bottle opens at the top, and then you can squeeze the content out from this hole here. And then you can open the bottom as well. And there is a wide opening where you can easily clean, refill, and empty as well. And actually, so this idea came, so I had it several years ago, and to bring it forward into reality was quite a big challenge. So at the beginning, I got a lot of rejections because people thought, okay, it's too different, it's too complex to actually realize. So I had to overcome this type of technical challenges. But at the same time, I kept receiving requests from people that wanted the bottle. It wasn't enough for me to start production, but this is what kept me going. So, you know, I never stopped working also on the wider conversation around plastic waste and circular product design. And so, yeah, after I had the idea, you know, I just did some visualizations of the idea that I had, and these images got published into this international online magazine. And the day after, I started receiving requests from all over the world. And it's funny because the product didn't exist. So I was kind of overwhelmed. And the first thing I did is I protected the design. And actually, that's the first prototype that we did. So you can see it was quite different. Slightly different from what it looks like now. And yeah, and actually this, just to produce this is 400 euros. So there was no way that I could you know, bring this to the market and sell it. So I had to find a way to overcome this high initial price. And that's when we started raising government funding. So we managed to raise some small funding to develop the technical details of the product. So we had to figure out how to technically develop this part in order to be leak-proof. And so with this small funding, we partner up with the University of Technology from Chemnitz, always here in Saxony, in Eastern Germany. And together with them, we did some testing that I can show you. So these are closing mechanism testing that we did with them. So you can see how it's a bit, I mean, this is one of the first tests, but you can see there is a click mechanism. So you make sure that no liquid comes out of the top opening. And But yeah, so this was the first step of industrial production, and it was just the beginning. So we needed to go forward and find another way to cover industrial production. And that's actually when, yeah.
Sorry, didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to ask, so did I understand clear that you didn't have like an existing brand corporation when you first kicked off? It was your idea to start developing a product or a bottle. So you didn't have anyone who was interested in it already, or kind of wanted to partner up with it. So it was a kind of sales in many levels at the same time, like technical thing and getting other brands interested in it.
That's right. That's right. So at the moment I was just running on my, at that moment I was running on my passion. So I wanted to focus on my own products, on my own design. So I was, proactively developing my design without having any clients. So it was something I was doing in my free time, actually. So this was actually developed as a side project because at that moment I was working on something else. So yeah, it was basically all self-managed and self-organized because I had no clients and no partners.
That's
but
really
yeah,
cool.
After a few years. Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. That's really cool, and probably that's also makes it all the technical things much more difficult as well, because of, as you said, you need a grant to test technical detail or some sort of how to get the funding mm-hmm. for such.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, yes, the financial support was quite key, but also as a designer, you should surround yourself by people that have knowledge specifically in the things you are doing. I mean, at the moment, designers have quite a high level knowledge about a lot of things. And for me, I kind of struggle with that, and I wanted to focus on more specifically, or something more specific. And I mean, packaging design and packaging production is something that I kind of became an expert of because, the actual experience of bringing a packaging idea from idea to production made me an expert because, I had to go through all the process, like from finding a producer, finding a technical partner, developing the brand around it. So it's really important for designers to grow a network around them and really get out there and also get out of your comfort zone to actually learn the more technical things that you don't necessarily have, or you don't necessarily have studied or have experienced from the profession of design.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, actually I founded one startup before founding Cyclic Design. So actually, as a designer, I am quite entrepreneurial. So after my experience in the corporate world, working at Siemens, I decided to work on my own things. And that's when I gained a lot of experience in terms of business development and also soft skills and networking and so on. So that's really helped me through the process because, I could really build a network that was supporting me throughout the product development. And so, yeah, it ended up to the time where we found a client that ordered enough units in order to cover the industrial production. So that's when, and that was last year. So also last year we were part of the Tech Founders Accelerator in Munich. So there we also revised our business model because, we are not the actual producer of the bottle. We are the designer. So we hold the intellectual property, but we don't produce. So we cannot sell it in the same way. And that's when we decided to go for a license fee model. I mean, I think that's what usually designers do, like royalty-based business model. And at the same time, we found a producer. So also we wanted to prioritize local production. So we found a producer in Saxony, also near us, who is now developing the tool for production. And at the same time, so since we became, let's say, packaging manufacturing expert, we are now also consulting other businesses to shift their packaging towards a more sustainable type of packaging. So we have been approached by.
How long did it take before you found the manufacturer, like from the start till finished? What's the time scale that you are currently talking about?
That's an interesting question, because we didn't just go with the first one that we found, but we had to be very selective, because not all of them were happy. Like some people, some producers were like, "What is this? You will never be able to produce it." So I had to face, I had to deal with this as well. But some others, on the contrary, they were really open to collaborate. So it took, all in all, at least 3 months process. So, I went to the biggest plastic manufacturing trade show in Düsseldorf. It's called the K Messe. That was last October. And there it was great because I could get in contact with a lot of manufacturers and assess the situation on who was actually open for collaboration and who wasn't. And then until the selection and then signing the contract, it's a long process, 3 to 5 months process.
And the design itself, like especially going through all the technical details of the click mechanism and everything, how long did this roughly take you?
So that took way longer because we worked with our technical partner, University of Technology of Chemnitz, who modified the closing mechanism as well as the thickness of, you can see the difference is way thinner. So we actually reduced the material here in the top part. And also the shape was changed. So we couldn't have any undercut at the bottom because actually in order to produce it, you need to introduce a core, a metal core inside, and you have to extract it. So we cannot have this shape because otherwise you are not able to extract the core. So then the design was modified towards enabling that. And then, we had to, let's say, update also the bottom part, the grip of the lid here, and the grip of this part. So it's also a long design iterative process that lasted. Good question. I never calculated, but it started last year in around July, August. So, and then it ended March this year around. That's when we finalized the design and shipped the final design to the producer, and then they started the more production. So
that's quite a while. Yeah. It's
quite a while, yes.
I assume that's quite a normal also for a product design project or such.
I think if you are working with physical products, that's pretty normal, especially physical products that have not been done before. That's actually, maybe that's quite little. it depends. It's but yeah, it's not a 1 month process. That's for sure. Yeah, so that's the latest prototype. That's a vacuum formed with pouring, and so this one has more like the material properties that the final product will have, because the bottle needs to be squeezable. And actually, we are using sugarcane-based bioplastics for the bottle. And of course, there is a lot of controversies around bioplastics. Like it's hard for the consumer to know where to dispose it. Is it actually a sustainable option? So we decided to go for a bioplastic that is recyclable at the end of life. So you need to just throw it. I mean, this one is reusable, so it would last for at least 2 years. But once the use phase is over, you can recycle it, and it's 100% recyclable. Yes, and so of course, production was one thing, but also the brand development was another important part of the project, and that's because we wanted to give a lot of importance to the educational side of the project, because this, we don't want it to be just a fancy product. This is a product that has a meaning, and it wants to shift the mindset of the consumer from disposable to reusable packaging. So the brand the branding development is something that speaks to the consumer a lot. So the brand, it was actually important for us to keep our brand, because one way that we could have gone is to white label the packaging. So that means we put another company's brand in here, and so this packaging is recognized as this other brand. But we wanted to develop our own brand. So actually this bottle will be sold empty in stores, and it will have an educational platform related to it. So where you can go and find additional information on the product and how to ease the transition from disposable to reusable packaging consumption. And it will be available around March next year. So that's also another thing I forgot to mention.
Why did you choose to have this self-branded thing? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And what value did you see in having your own standalone product as opposed to having another brand use it?
Right. So yeah, that's a good question that we thought about for a long time. So for us, we didn't want to lose the identity and the social and environmental cause. And that's why we didn't trust into another brand to take over the packaging identity, let's say. So we wanted to keep a strong identity to emphasize this environmental aspect of the product, because as I mentioned before, it was very important for us to have this educational aspect and to educate the consumer towards how he can refill the bottle, where he can refill it, what he can use it for. So that's something that we felt more comfortable developing ourselves. So now we are working, for instance, with a branding agency that is developing the branding and the interface for the consumer. So we are, this way we are more in control of the consumer interface. And that was really important for us. And that's why we went for a self-created brand.
Mitsu Kuno also asked a question in the chat. Mitsu, do you want to maybe unmute you and read the question out loud? Or I can do it as well.
Oh no, sorry. Hi.
No.
Sorry. Sorry. Maybe I think I do believe that you mentioned it a few times, but did you? So when you chose the materials and designed it, what was like the process of discussing with the waste management side to kind of have find the ideal status of the product when recycled? Like for example, when you start putting stickers, it becomes harder to recycle and that kind of stuff. Was there any particular findings that you had, and did it bring any limitation on how you instructed users to use the product? Like was there any challenges that due to the discussion with the waste management side had to revisit the design of the Nepenthes, I believe. Yeah, if you could, can you let me know? That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. It's a very, very good question. Actually, the design started by looking at the waste management process and what is the best way or the most efficient way to recycle a shampoo bottle, right? And that's meaning to have a monomaterial packaging that doesn't require any separation. So it would go through the sorting process, and of course selecting a recyclable material was a high priority for us. So actually, you know, we set these requirements from the beginning. So we didn't change along the way in terms of material choice. So from the beginning, we wanted to select a 100% recyclable material that would be easy to recycle at the end of life. But that's because, you know, I had a clear knowledge of how the recycling process works, and that was, you know, from my research. As a circular product designer, you know, that's something I had in myself from a background, and I introduced it in the product development. So it was something that was there from the start. I hope I answer your question. So I didn't go through a iteration.
No, it's okay.
So the selection process.
Oh yeah, okay. No, that sounds like well, that's an ideal, right? Like hypothetically speaking, when you design a product, it's like you understand how the product is used then. But thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think as a designer, I mean, for me, you know, I'm really interested by technology and by how actually machine works and processes work. So I dig deep into the recycling process or the production process. So I wanted to make sure what I'm developing actually makes sense at the end of life, as well as the beginning of life. So I didn't want to put out in the market something that was obsolete, basically.
Thank you.
And so, Marilu, how is it going now with your project? Where are you? What are you currently working on? What's the response that you've received so far?
So at the moment, we are in the middle of brand development. So we have developed the whole visual identity of around the product, and that's I mean, that's kind of like a back and forth with many players, because, you know, we will launch the product together with our retailer partner. So it's the second biggest German retailer. And, you know, they want to have their say, and we also want to have our say. So we are, you know, coordinating the project from this perspective. And industrial production is also underway. And also we need to cover sales activity. So that's also the third branch. And at the moment, we also do consulting work for other companies on sustainable packaging. So this is what keeps us busy at the moment. I mean, actually, there is a big demand for sustainable packaging from small companies, but also bigger companies, especially selecting materials and selecting which direction to go. Because, you know, there is a lot of innovation going on in this sphere, and companies, they need guidance towards all these new things that are popping up.
Peter, you had a question as well. Do you want to ask it, please?
You certainly did testing with end consumers. Can you tell us a little bit about how that worked as far as acceptance and usability goes?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So we have the problem that, you know, we don't have the final product because of the high investment cost that for industrial production. So the user testing, we will do it when we will receive the 0 series. So that's the first industrial batch. And we have planned qualitative interviews with users. So more on an empathetic level. And the way we want to do it is to select a number of people that will use the product for, let's say, 1 month. And after this 1 month of test, we will get back to them and schedule interviews with them where we can gather feedback from their user experience. And that will feed then into any changes or small changes that should be integrated following that.
Okay, great, thank you.
And so we'd have some time also to listen to what Harri has to talk. I wanted to ask maybe as a final remark, and we will have a time also afterwards for mixed discussion, don't worry. But I wanted to ask, so where will we be able to get it, hopefully after, let's say, when and when and where? And also Grace Sinclair asked, does it get recycled back into another bottle? So is it like a closed loop bottle?
Ideally, yes, but I don't have the power over the recyclers. So depending on which city or which municipality, which recycling center that will be recycled into another bottle or into something else. But the end would be an recycled polyethylene material.
May I ask? Hi, Marilu.
Hey, Stefani.
Why you? I mean, I love bioplastics and overall the non fossil fuel plastics, definitely great. But still, when you look at today PET, the closed loop things, it's a marvelous material nowadays that you could recycle over and over again. It had a hygienic, it had a full, the food contained legal issues and all that. All the other plastic, you always have to check basically that could you use that for food packaging and things like that. So what was the reason why you are looking this bioplastic? Because the price of the bottle will be much higher. Recycling is more challenging, how you could actually get those back because those are special plastic. PET is we have already one solution, and that is a PET that you could make new bottles endlessly, or you make clothing, or you could do whatever out of that material.
So the material that we are using is recyclable as normal fossil fuel polyethylene. So that's
but how if from where and how to take back and all. I mean, when you have PET bottle or PET as a material, there's a recycling system that will collect PET back automatically. And then all the other plastics, it's more complicated.
Right. So, I mean, in Germany, you have the yellow bin, right? That gets, so what you throw inside the yellow bin gets to a sorting center, and that sorting center will separate what will be recycled and what will not be recycled. And so we have based our decision on the biggest or the widest plastic that is recyclable, that are recycled right now, which is PET, that you rightly said, also high density polyethylene and polypropylene. These three are the main three that gets recycled across Germany. So this is the material that we have selected. So Of course, we cannot make 100% sure it will get recycled because there is no technology that, I mean, you could, but it's too expensive to apply any tracking technology to plastic packaging at the moment. And it doesn't make sense from a cost perspective. So we are working with what is currently existing, and in Germany, the recycling system is quite good. I think you are talking about the deposit system with PET bottles, right?
No, actually, so you have selected the PET as a material or any of those most used plastics, which is good. I was just that when you were showing the bioplastic and other solution in your research, that why to select, or what is the reason to select, basically. That was my question, basically, against the PET.
Right.
And Carl-Johan Nelson has also a question similar, maybe connected to it. Like he's asking, like, what are the sustainability? Did you have any other sustainability perspectives in mind in terms of like the LCA or the
just more, yes, sure. I was just more interested in, you know, in terms of the selection process for this material that's been chosen for the bottle. If you use Marilu some, you know, LCA tool. I mean, you spoke that you had experience from Siemens, and that I thought that maybe you had used some sort of a software and kind of evaluate the different grades to see that this particular grade was, you know, suitable from all this different parameters that you have chosen from. So I just wonder if you could make a quick dive in on that part.
Yeah, sure. So actually, part of the funding that we raised from this government fund, we worked together with an environmental engineer who run a small LCA on the bottle, and we compared a fossil fuel based disposable bottle with our system and calculated the impact reduction. So we took a few material options, and we realized that actually this bio-based high density polyethylene was the one with the lowest emissions, or I mean, all these different parameters that we got from the LCA. We did it last year, so it's so yeah, that was also quite important for us to do, also to show our client that okay, you know, this, you know, we have substance behind what we are doing.
So you focused on carbon on the carbon emission mostly, or did you look at other factors as well? Like,
yes, so we factor in other because the environmental engineer that we worked with, she used this CIMA Pro LCA software, and we selected, I mean, she gave us a lot of parameters. So carbon emission was one of them, also water, water purity or something like this was also another one. So we had a few, but in the end the results were always resulting lower if you use any, you know, any type of parameters in the end. Also pollution, it was in there, particle.
Seems the material selection process is really something that triggers people. It may be because it's super difficult and complicated.
Yeah, it is.
Not looking into it.
Yeah, thanks.
Madeline also had a question about recycled plastic, and also Gabrielle had a question about stackability. But I suggest let's cut the conversation here for just a couple, 20 minutes, and let's resume to those very specific questions now already on that topic. And I think this is excellent that we have come to. Marilu, maybe just if there's anything you want to say to wrap up before moving on, and also where could we see it and when?
So the bottle will be available in stores in Germany at the end of March next year. So that's the date we are looking at. So not yet in Estonia or other countries of Europe. But we are working on growing our reach. So
Yeah.
hopefully
We can travel to buy it.
no, you shouldn't. That's not good. No, please don't travel to Germany just to buy it. We will figure something out.
All right, you can ship it to us all. All right, thank you very much, Marilu. It's an excellent project, and it really is a great example of how do you discover complexity in something simple, such as a household bottle. The simplest thing one can imagine, but really it opens the universe. And now we can move on to how you seek and look for simplicity in something so super complex, such something like a mega factory in Bangladesh. Harri, the floor is yours. We're happy to hear about the circular expertise that is sometimes, but also Marilu actually mentioned about surrounding people with different expertise to support the technical and analytical and all the systems thinking that actually the design requires. So what do you think about it?
Yes, actually, since I'm not a designer, and the project, or let's say the business model and design-based business model that I'm going to present to you is developed, actually the person behind is well-known fashion designer Reet Aus. I think quite many of you have heard about her journey, which has been quite long. She started her first tests and trials already more than 10 years ago. And she is the person who actually has brought on this upcycle-based garment design approach. And me and also Markus, we have been the experts who have been involved into this project already quite several years. So actually, I think I will then present very shortly the journey or some of the aspects, and not so much related to specific design aspects when it comes to garment design, specific aspects around that, but more and issues which actually are important, these relevant skills and knowledges that you need when exercising or developing circular design, design models in more complex systems. Although this garment design sounds also quite easy approach, but actually it's much, much more complex. So since I'm more a researcher, then of course I have some slides I have prepared to you just to illustrate the background a little bit about this idea and what have been the challenges, and maybe also shortly what are the main issues when it comes, as I said, what type of knowledge and skills you most often need to develop such more complex design and business model.
Harri, would you like to press on the full screen, please?
Yes, I do that. So I have even prepared a small video since Reetis couldn't be with us today, so I let her to explain this model in more detail through a small video. I hope it works. It's always a problem when it comes to different webinar systems. Anyway, as Markus already mentioned, yes, there has been some quite many long-term experience already, or let's say the whole project, or let's say the development of the design approach and the business model has lasted, I would say, soon close to 10 years from the idea creation. And now I have to admit that it has been past different stages, and to be honest, typically to many other circular, more complex systems and developments, of course, it still requires further development. It's not really mature. It's still in the, I would say, already quite mature stage, but still it has not reached to very wide levels. So they're scaling up and really, influencing the overall fashion sector, especially bringing the designers and brands into this methodology. It still needs to be done, but it works. And the initial idea, as I said, was already brought up 10 years ago. And this is mainly related to production waste. So today in Europe and in the global scale, we mainly talk about post-consumer waste. Used garments that we don't use, this is really a problem, and there are soon several requirements coming in, especially when it comes to European Union. But now we are talking about the production waste, and most often this has not been really recognized. It's not so visual problem, and we as consumers don't often see what happens in these supply chains or the production places where our products are produced. And most of our garments today are produced in third countries, and then the environmental impact produced there is not really visual for us. So basically, we recently finalized our research, and we are in the process of publishing a small research article also. But now we are more or less clear or sure that the amount of waste produced in production units, it's really high. It's basically from 25 to 40% of total fabric used. And it depends a bit about the products they produce, but also the size and other specific issues. So, but you know, 40% of waste when it comes to the total fabric used, it's really huge amount. 10 years ago, when we started this project, most of this waste basically was landfilled or incinerated in a very basic incinerator, so the pollution was really huge. And it's also an issue of wasting valuable material. So that's why the waste issue has been quite long time already an issue which especially manufacturing companies have tried to solve. But as I said earlier, this is really an issue which mainly came up from producers' side. Brands mainly being away, quite far from production units. Most often, even today, although they have much more started to recognize this waste problem, they are still not aware about the size and then the problem as such. So, and this is not also so much the problem because they have, in a way, put this problem on the shoulders of producers. So that's why this was, as a starting point, of course, a problem of producers. They kind of recognized that there is a need to change this type of not very sustainable way of utilizing the waste streams. And from the other point of view, of course, you know, looking for some sort of affordable technology, this was the other option. Because at the moment, in parallel, there is a lot of development going on when it comes to recycling of leftovers generated in production units. But this is still related to quite heavy investments, technology investments, but also developments. And that's why it's not really affordable. Plus, of course, the issue related to what to produce out of that recycled fiber. So what are the products? Usually this type of material is then downcycled. So basically there was a clear need to come up with some sort of solution which in a way would fit into the current system, basically with having very efficient way of recycling or reusing the leftovers. And the other issue was also, you know, what could be the products that you can produce here. And of course, the preferable approach is to upcycle the waste. So in a way, the whole concept is then based on the concept called upcycling. Of course, upcycling can be understood in different ways. It has been used in very many industry sectors. But when it comes to, let's say, textiles and fashion sector or industry, we have understood what we would like to say or define when it comes to upcycling, that this is something where you really produce higher value products out of the leftovers or waste. So in broad sense, you can divide the recycling into upcycling and downcycling. So basically, if we look back on bottles, then of course, the best thing would be to recycle the material or waste or leftover to the same product minimum. So in the case of bottle, we call it bottle-to-bottle recycling. And here we definitely would like to produce garments out of the waste generated in the production phase. So we are not talking about downcycling, which is usually downgrading and really discarding the work and value which have been invested into that. So the whole model is then integrated into this approach, which is called upcycling. And maybe just let the red to tell how it looks like. I will show you a video. I hope you will hear also a sound. If there are some problems, please, Markus, let me know.
This is Red House. She's a fashion designer who loves her job. In order to avoid the environmentally hostile fast fashion industry, she started working with textile waste because just one large Bangladesh factory produces 240 million garments each year, 18% of which become leftovers. That means 12,840 tons of waste created every year by just one factory. It's clear that we have to find solutions for ways to redirect the leftovers back into the production process. Trash becomes fashion. UpMade was developed to solve the problem. Software plus certification plus design equals industrial upcycling. UpMade software transparently shows the perfectly usable leftovers inside manufacturing. New garments for the brand are then designed and produced out of its own leftover material. Not only is the waste prevented, UpMade opens new sustainable revenues for both the producer and the brand. UpMade is the first industrial scale upcycling method in the world. In its 3 years of activity, UpMade has saved a great amount of energy, water, CO2, and textiles that don't end up in landfills. And with that, we reduce the environmental impact of this wasteful industry. Large changes always begin with small steps.
Okay. So, in a way, just to describe the development stages which we have gone through, in a way, first, of course, the focus was on developing the upcycling-based design approach. In a way, this was, I would say, one of the easiest, steps or problems to solve because the design knowledge was there, and this was very much first Red's kind of initiative. But quite soon she recognized that there are many challenges that she has to, solve in a way. And then, of course, it might sound easy, you go to the factory there in Asia, most probably you will find lots of leftovers and waste, textile waste, and you simply start to design, garments out of that. Yeah, it sounds easy, but the reality was totally different. In a way, the knowledge and then the data about the waste, this is really something which is the most difficult thing to get, because most of those production companies actually don't know themselves how much waste they generate. They know in general that the waste is generated, but where it is taken, what type of waste, all these kind of questions were also new for most of those manufacturing companies. So it took quite long time to develop waste data collection system. So in a way, we ended up by really developing a quite detailed waste mapping system, which actually fits into the manufacturing processes. And the other, in a way, assessment step with what we quite clearly recognized, this was life cycle assessment, which was really needed because in a way, if you want to really compare the life cycle based environmental impact of upcycled garments with conventional garments, plus also you need certain information to market your product, it was clear that we should really carry out relatively detailed level life cycle assessment. And this was also, in a way, a quite long process. And then, of course, in a way, the system in a lowest, or let's say the minimum program was fulfilled, and it was possible to start to produce upcycled garments. But soon we recognized that there is a need to really develop a certain transparency mechanism, because if you do the upcycling based method in one company, then which is under your control, then it's relatively easy. But the idea was that different manufacturing units can take over the same system. So we had to develop, first of all, a specific production system which would fit into the processes of conventional manufacturing companies, and to allow the transparency, and also to ensure that the companies really fulfill these specific requirements, especially when it comes to criteria of upcycling, which means that 95% of the material should come from waste materials, plus it should really cover the control of hazardous chemicals, plus workers' conditions. So we, in a way, we had to develop a certification scheme, and this also took quite some time. And then quite soon, when we started to look for a more scale up of this system, we recognized that, that there is a need to have a proper data exchange system. So basically, most of the designers are located in France, sitting in the different side of the global context. So in a way, it was very important to allow to put the designers and manufacturers together, and it was very important to exchange the information, so that you can already, when designing a conventional garment, you can already get the information how much waste you produce, and based on that data you can already in parallel design an upcycled product. So this also took a long time, and it's still under the development. I would say one of the biggest challenges why this system has not managed yet to be more widely used among different other brands. So, and then of course, providing different type of services. So in a way we recognize that there are different needs from different brands, and you have to be flexible. So you can't really expect that you can sell or provide a kind of one type of service by changing information or providing waste information or design knowledge. You have to really provide different types of services, and basically you have to be flexible. So in a way you need different services and setups to really fulfill the needs and fit into the global, let's say, garment supply chain or value chain system. So these were the steps, and at the moment, main of the focus, the first three steps are working pretty well. Fourth and fifth stages are not yet finalized, and this is still something that has to be done to also scale up and become much wider in the terms of covering this approach. But at the same time, there is really a high interest now among brands, and we see that the upcycling is becoming really fashionable, and there is definitely a growing need for this type of approach. So basically, what we can conclude out of that, we can clearly see that this type of more complex systems, when it comes to circular design, circular business model development, we really have to understand the system, and for that we need expertise and knowledge. So just to mention once again, textile waste generation and management system, it looks and sounds like an easy part, but it's very, very difficult and complex system. You really have to know and understand how it works. And you also have to provide your own scheme, which fits into the current manufacturing system, to really organize the waste collection, segregation, and also upcycling system. So you really need to provide a new system for manufacturing companies. And the other main problem is really understanding the relationship between supply chain management or the supply chain actors, and especially the issue which is related to brand and producer current relationship. But this is very much top down and creates actually the problem. So there is really, you have to really understand and know how it works. Unfortunately, today, most of the fashion designers are not aware about those issues. And this means that you really have to involve people who can help you in developing this type of more complex systems. So, and then one more issue to mention, and I'm happy to hear that this life cycle thinking and life cycle assessment has become an issue, which is, I would say, a mandatory part of any of those circular design projects. You don't need to go into the details, but you have to know what are the environmental impacts of your product, what are the steps, what are the biggest issues, what are the impact categories you have to focus. So it is just an illustration of part of the work that was carried by Markus actually, and we can see that that even this type of simple products such as piece of garment or clothing, the life cycle can be really, really complex. And finally, you know, again, stressing that in addition to these design skills, this is really a multidisciplinary approach. And then definitely you need different type of knowledge and expertise. As we heard from previous presenter also, you have to involve different people, engineers, business people, branding, all these type of things. But when it comes to circular design, then we clearly see that there is a need to involve life cycle experts, and different type of understanding related to the system is really, really needed, because as we discussed earlier, it might be so complex, and if you really don't understand the system, you might make totally wrong decisions. And this, our case with upcycling business model actually has very well shown that this system understanding is the basis for everything. And it has been, that's why taken so much time that we first really didn't take it into account. And now after working more than 5 years on that area, we can say that we a little bit know about the system and we are ready to respond to it.
Harri, you mentioned it in your previous slide that the waste textile generation, the waste generation complexity is really a huge one. Can you draw some examples of, can you use, like when you want to upcycle, use the leftover materials, can you use any materials, and can you just collect the materials, set up the production, or what are the technical and the procedural realities that have shaped the whole intervention?
Yeah, well, of course, first you have to know what type of waste is generated in these garment manufacturing facilities. And this is very much the basic information that you have to know by being a designer, because the whole idea is to make, if you want to bring this upcycling approach on mass production level, you have to be very efficient. So this means that you have to integrate this whole upcycling process into the current existing production process. And this is the beauty of the upcycling approach, that you don't need to really change the technology. Basically, you can organize it based on existing technology. All you have to do, you have to reorganize the system. You have to really, first you have to evaluate and really make an appropriate waste analysis. Based on that, you can understand what type of waste, because the waste types are very different. You know, the majority of waste comes from cutting waste, which is well known and most visual waste stream, small pieces of waste which are kind of leftovers from cutting process. But there are several other steps where you generate much more, I would say, appropriate or useful leftovers, which are very, very good for upcycling, which are not usually even covered and so much recognized. And then one issue is this brand producer relationship, which actually creates lots of leftovers, and not small pieces, but rolls of fabric, lots of leftover fabric, because this up-down system, which is not very sustainable and healthy, creates also lots of waste, because you can easily, you know, change the order in the middle of the order if you don't like the producer. So most of the brands, they have more than 10 producers, and they change them like that. So this is really a headache of producers, because the risk, and also risk in terms of really collecting and paying for resources, especially when it comes to fabric. So they have to take this risk. So if they have bought the fabric and the order is quitted, then they have this fabric and they don't know what to do with that. This is one of the issues and one of the reasons for generating lots of leftovers in a way. So the different types of leftovers, you have to map them, and based on this knowledge, you can also develop a specific design approaches, upcycled design approaches. But internally, you have to really organize this whole manufacturing in a way that you don't mix them up in the first stage, but you really already integrate this design and also manufacturing into very beginning of the whole process, so that you can already in the cutting table, you can cut out the original product or pieces for original product, and also by knowing how much leftovers you generate on the cutting table, you can design in already cuts for upcycled products. So this is the most challenging issue and question which you have to solve by really developing internal manufacturing process of upcycled products. I don't know whether I answered to you, but you know, I tried to explain how complex is it and how difficult it is to organize it. But if you work out the procedures and the methodology, then actually based on our knowledge, it's relatively easy to introduce it into the manufacturing companies, because they are used to work on different you know, systems. Either they are quality related, health and safety. So in a way, it's relatively easy if they introduce these processes, the processes of upcycling, then it is possible to do it in a mass scale, and you can really relatively well cut down the costs for producing such garments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think the most fascinating part of it, that it's the waste that is generated is not only from the original design. It's not just that you cut something out that you kind of can follow this design logic, but there's a business rationale behind it and production rationale behind it that you can't identify from the design before knowing the system. Yeah. So Harri, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or this is the discussion part of your talk?
Well, yeah, if there are any questions, then of course, but then, yeah, well, I think this, our nice project very well contributing to this understanding which has been brought up recently, that the circular design is really demands more than just ordinary design, because you really need to invest into time, and also you need specific skills and knowledges, especially when it comes to understanding the system. It's not just zooming in, zooming out, but you really have to take several steps back and really spend some time on understanding how the system works. And this is most often one of these biggest shocks, I would say, what designers will face, or usually they face, is that even they might think that the product is relatively simple, but the system behind could be very, very complex.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, this leads into the education of designers, which I know Markus is writing his PhD thesis on that. So we really are waiting for the results. So maybe you will come up with some real good suggestions on how to improve the education system of designers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good case of how, and both of your talks are really an example of how the expanded skill sets are necessary. And the question is, how do we get them? And this session today is also, let's say, part of that story, that we don't have the necessary expertise to tackle any one problem when we start. We had to develop it along the way, or incorporate people who have that expertise. And Harri, like you said, in the example of this upcycling example, there there are different interests at play. Like the factory, of course, is interested in not getting rid of the waste necessarily, but maybe getting value out of the existing material that is already in the production. And instead of throwing it away as a cost, they can like upcycling promises them to sell it. So how do you think that this makes sense along the brands as well, or what are different rationales between the designer of upcycling, the manufacturer, and the brand who produces all the millions of garments there? What are they interested in getting out of it, let's say?
Actually, of course, the main interest should be on the side of brands, because they are the ones who are actually responsible of their products they produce. And as I said, in a way, they have the power to steer the system the most. And as I already explained, manufacturers today, especially when it comes to garment manufacturing, are in a very weak position because they don't have too much power to influence the decisions made or the way how the system or the whole supply chain works. At the same time, they are very much interested in more long-term and sustainable cooperation with brands. You know, their main fear is that they can be changed quickly to other producers, and this is what happens actually very often. So it could be that your quality is not so high or your price is too high. So brands are, although they declare being sustainable, it's still quite, harsh business sector. So they're not really behaving very well from that point of view. The other thing is that they are not so much interested what happens down there. And especially our project showed that their knowledge and understanding about how much waste they generate, or basically how much waste is generated to produce their clothing, it's really surprising that they don't understand it. This is also partly integrated into the knowledge and understanding of designers who are usually part of the brands. We started this business model development, or Red started it by under her own brand in a way. So in a way, this is the easiest option, but the idea is that the same approach will be taken over by all conventional brands. So they are the ones who should really steer and trigger the wider implementation of upcycling. And of course, they should be more aware, as well as they have to be the ones who go for more, or let's say, prevention of waste. So they have to upcycle. But at the same time, yes, as I said, the producers are the ones who have the problem. At the moment, they have to take care of the problem. But at the same time, they are also worried about the long-term relationship with brands. So in a way, this upcycling, or let's say upmade scheme, through this certification and other cooperation, information loops and other cooperation, actually also provides a good basis for long-term relationships, which also provides very good and healthy supply chain management basis. So I think this is the strength of the system also, so that you really will focus on your producers and you together try to solve that in a transparent way.
It's an interesting overlap between your two talks, that it's easier, as if it's easier to initiate a circular design project independently. And because then you can really make sure that it covers everything and it truly, the model is circular, and it's, I don't know, you can control what is the outcome and not just greenwash anything. And Harri, I wanted to ask also your personal, let's say, like personal take on it. It's of course understood that it's complex and it's difficult, and there are some stages that you have identified along the way as well, which I'm sure has never been totally linear, has been very like cyclic on its own route, right? So what do you think what was the most difficult along the process? Like if you understood the problem and you understood what needed to be done for ready to be able to start designing. So what was the biggest hurdle for you to be able to provide the analytical understanding and the systems understanding, or to change the processes there?
You mean from Red's point of view, who is the key person?
No, you yourself as the circular support.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult in a way. You might, as an expert on, let's say, systems or analytical tools, you really have to take into account the initial idea or the wishes of the designer in a way. So you really have to understand what is the ability and the wishes where she or he would like to go in a way. So this was, I would say, the biggest problem. And then in a certain moment, we realized that we as experts started to provide more and more information, which made it very difficult to decide really where to stop or what is relevant in a way. So as I showed in one of my slides, that the first idea was just to go to Asia and start to produce upcycled garments. Sounds easy in a way, but then it turned out that we have to develop new elements. And now, as I showed in one of the pictures, it's not anymore really a design project. It's really a business model which is growing and growing. So in a certain moment, you really have to take a certain stop and see where to invest money. And I think we have spent lots of time because we have tested and spent too much time on some areas where there is not maybe so much need to focus. For example, this information exchange tool, which took lots of time, and we here in Estonia, we think that IT is something which will solve everything. All you need is some sort of app or IT plugin, which in a way starts to do everything on its own. But it turned out at the end of the process that actually everything is based on design. So we have to come back to the first initial design idea and then really start to think what is relevant from that perspective. So I think it's very much a cooperation between different experts, but I think at the end, I'm happy to see the design is still the basis. So we have to build it around the design. So if you don't have the design, then you don't have anything, I would say.
Harsh words. Are there any questions from the crowd? Someone maybe who hasn't shared their view yet. We have 5 minutes before the organized time will end.
I have maybe one question.
Go ahead, Martin.
I won't write it down, but basically, I imagine that, okay, you had an idea and now you need to start basically gathering the data for your analytical system and so on. How did it happen? Because I imagine that you went to Bangladesh or Asia or wherever the factories are located, and then you like stumble upon the factories which are not keeping any track on how much waste they produce and so on and so on. How did you, what was the first step, or like how did this happen in real life? Because you have to get the data from someone who doesn't know anything about it or has really little knowledge. So, you know, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the first step was to develop a method for waste mapping within the manufacturing unit. And this is something which was already made by Red already earlier, although at that time she was looking more for a wider mapping among different companies, and there are different circular design approaches which still try to solve this problem, you know, bringing together different manufacturing units and this type of exchange platform, which never works very well because the conventional waste management system always competes with and it tries to kill it. But we took a more easy step. So we went into the companies and then we developed, I would say, very well designed method to collect information and really to manage this information, this data within the company. And the next step was already, you know, to make this data flow available for designers. So it has to be really updated information that you get immediately. So there is a possibility before you send in your order, you could get information how much waste is generated. And based on that, you can already make your decision when it comes to design. But this is still not yet working very well, but at least you need some sort of really well functioning waste inventory system in the company.
We have 2 minutes before the official end, but I wanted to say that we're not going to close or mute the session, so everyone is welcome to stay here in the open channel if they feel like. I take this a moment to thank you all for joining us to the first global circular design how-to session. And we will have them again in the next month. If you feel like you have a project that you want to share, we already have quite many of people who have showed their interest. But if you feel that this is the platform where you can openly share and discuss and establish connections based on what you have done before, and want to continue this conversation amongst this crowd, then please reach out to me, to markus@designikeskus.ee. It's also, the contact is at the event. And I wanted to thank you all for joining, listening, talking, participating, especially Marilu and Harri. Thank you so much for this very interesting and very diverse yet somehow similar conversation. And I announced the official part has ended, which means that maybe nothing has really changed. So thank you very much. Joel is having a question. Joel, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yes, thanks. So basically I had a question regarding facilitating design sprints or circular design sprints. So if we take into account that achieving some kind of meaningful change towards circularity requires systems and design and business model change, then what should a short and intense design sprint focus on in order to trigger the best impact for the company? How would you see what can we achieve in a short amount of time to in a way start this process for a longer term change?
Maybe I can give my opinion or my feedback on this question. So definitely, I think it also depends on what kind of company you're talking to. And I think you should first of all gather data of their vision and align it with where you want to get to in terms of circular design, because I guess you might have specific brief. I mean, it depends on what's your relationship with the company or what they are looking for, but definitely gather feedback from their side as much as you can, and yeah, have a brainstorming session with them, but I wouldn't make it too broad and rather focus on something that could be achieved. You know, and perhaps what you can propose is having a short-term option and a longer-term option. So you can propose something that can be implemented easily and in soon, and focus the discussion on that. And but at the same time having the option open for a longer-term agenda. So how you can in a longer term implement your circular change inside the company, but it would take a while, let's say.
I fully agree. It's better to focus on something which is tangible and so that they can really afford. The whole idea of the sprint is to really give them some ideas and ways and means and methods on how to do that on their own. So it, of course, as we heard, quite often this type of circular design projects, they tend to take more time as you expect. So that's why if you really take two, ambitious goals, or you as a let's say design manager or somebody who assists them should really help them to put the right scope on that exercise. But of course, you should also give them some idea and also to show the main elements and challenges in a way that the longer journey or the longer project could be also possible, but this is usually, as I understand, in the frame of any of those support projects, it's very difficult. So you can't really plan, let's say, 2-3 year long project. So it should be something which is affordable and they can do in short terms.
Yep, thanks.
Joel, I know also that just a quick comment on Joel, that Joel has developed and is conducting circular design sprints as well, or started to do them. So he's really getting into the whole circularity field. So welcome, Joel.
Yeah, thanks.
There's Madeleine asked one question earlier before that Marilu, that if there were not, what other requirements or parameters were there for the bottle actually? Meaning that we have discussed the material, we have discussed the circularity aspects, but probably there are like safety, child hazard, choke hazard, all those kind of things which go along with consumer items, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. There are quite a few regulations that actually regulate packaging, especially for food. I mean, food packaging is way more regulated for obvious reason. Packaging for personal care content is a bit less regulated, but since it's a liquid inside, you need to also consider such parameters. But I think this is something that the producer knows very well. So actually, we dealt with that through choosing the right partner that meets the standard for personal care content packaging. And I think there was also a question on recycled content material that I was reading before.
Yeah, it was me who asked the same question. Yeah, Madeleine here. Yeah, because I was wondering, because you talked about when you choose the material for the packaging. I was wondering what are the parameters you were looking at for this bottle, and if you were considering using any kind of recycled material, depending on the other requirements that you have on the packaging. I mean, if requirements regarding, if it's a snap fit, for instance, that the plastic needs to be needs properties that makes it a little bit elastic and so on. And also I noticed that Tapani asked about using PET, and were you thinking then of other requirements and why you didn't choose to use, for instance, recycled PET or a certain percentage of recycled materials within, so I was wondering a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So first of all, the material needed to be flexible because the entire bottle needs to either bend here at the top or needed to be squeezed. So this is something that we needed to consider. Then the fact that it would get in contact with content that could potentially have oil inside. So we needed to make sure that there is no transmission between the content and the packaging. And we looked at what is currently, or what type of materials are currently used for such personal care content packaging. So this was our starting point. And we saw that high density polyethylene was one that was widely used, and there was no chemical transmission between the content and the packaging. So that was quite a safe choice from that perspective. For the recycled content, it's interesting because actually at the beginning we wanted to use recycled polymers. However, the purity of the material we couldn't use it because the hygiene, it's mainly for hygiene. Because usually, for instance, this bottle, it's made with 100% polyethylene. It's high density polyethylene. However, this uses a specific manufacturing technique that enables it to have an inner layer, so you can actually have a barrier between the content and the packaging. But we are using a different manufacturing technique, so that's why we couldn't use recycled polymer, and that's why we went for bio-based polymers.
Okay, but is it the injection molded or?
Yes, we are using injection molding,
Okay.
while this is use extrusion blow molding.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually extrusion blow molding is what is usually used for bottle production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With or sometimes you have a preform and then it's blow molded. So. But you know, with this type of blow molding, you always have you can have multiple layers in your material, not with injection molding, because you just inject one material.
Yeah. I was thinking also because I mean, when it comes to PET, those recyclates are the only ones that you can actually use for food packaging, as Tapani said. So I was just thinking the purity of that material would maybe be possible to use in your kind of, but you couldn't find that kind of pure PT recycled material, or was the properties of that PT not suitable for other functions in your bottle?
So PT is not the material we are using, first of all.
No,
so
yeah,
because
I know, but
it's high density polyethylene.
But I was wondering, because you had looked at the alternative of using PT, so I wondered why you didn't choose that.
PT is not as flexible.
Yeah,
that's the main
problem. Yeah, okay.
PT will never be able to be squeezed or to be bent because it would be much stiffer. So it was more of a mechanical property.
Yeah. Okay.
That we couldn't go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But for instance,
in PT, you still need some sort of interlayer, I guess, if you want to use it for food. So there is not so that you have poor PET. So anyway, you have to have this internal layer. So the technology is more or less the same for PE and PET from that point of view.
Yeah, exactly. For food packaging, they mainly use this laminate, and mainly it's thermoforming, and you always have an inner layer that creates a barrier between the food and the actual recycled content layer of the packaging. So yes.
What inner layer is it? What type of inner layer? Because is it the same that is used in aluminum cans?
Virgin PET. Clean one.
Yes, most probably, and that's what also is in aluminium cans, because it's true that if you take out all the aluminium from the can, you are left with a layer of plastic. Have you ever seen this video? It's crazy. There was a video of somebody who just took all the aluminium out, and they're just left with this inner layer of, and it's it could be very much a virgin PET, yes.
Madeleine, are you developing some of your own plastic products that you're so immersed in the topic?
Yeah, well, I'm a product developer, so I've worked with product development in 15 years, and I've also worked as a consultant for so long. So I have developed all kinds of products, and a lot of plastic products. So I'm very interested in trying to change the way we design and work with plastics. So it's very interesting to understand how the process went on when you choose the material for your plastic packaging. I think it's very interesting to know what the problems were, why you couldn't choose certain maybe if you couldn't choose recycled material, why couldn't you choose that, and so on, so that we can try to make a change there. So that's why, and I think it's super interesting, very interesting too.
But actually, from our life cycle assessment, I was just really looking at it again. The bio-based polymer that we selected is slightly at a lower environmental impact than a recycled content polymer. So,
but what kind of environmental impact are we talking? Is it climate change impacts, or because I'm thinking about land use as a environmental impact that I mean it's a rather big impact when you're using sugarcane based plastics.
Yeah, so our LCA included acidification, eutrophication, global warming, ozone layer depletion, photochemical oxidation. So these are the parameters.
So land use. Yeah, land use was not them.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
That is super interesting, because I think a lot of I think that land use will be a greater parameter to consider when you're doing this kind of analysis.
But unfortunately, climate change is in the top of the agenda, so you still start to sell your product under climate change impact. So unfortunately, land use is not so highly ranked in the political discussion.
Yeah,
also the
but it will be.
Bioplastics are constantly produced from different materials, and this is the field that is developing very rapidly. Different raw materials, different technologies, and everything. And I personally have felt that there is it's sometimes difficult to find a consensus in any type of material when using biomaterials, bioplastics. So sugarcane is just one, but there are already companies doing other things. So it's difficult. Actually, it is difficult to keep track. Also taking into consideration that the recycling system in Germany differs from ours, for example. We don't have separation of bioplastics. So I completely agree with Madeleine, with you. And I also would like to add that it's very difficult to make sense in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it all interconnects when you are taking down trees in the Amazonas just to create land that you are using to grow crops that you can actually make plastics of. Then we have a problem that connects with climate change as well. So it's very interesting and something that we need to consider, I think.
And that's also, Harri, like you probably have felt it in the textile world, there's a constant debate between different fibers. And let's say cotton versus polyester or elastane, and versus viscose. Given that, okay, yes, one or the other, maybe the effect is small, but given the volume of textile industry, it is one of the biggest ones we have. Do you have preferences to fibers? Which are your favorite?
It's a good question, but you know, being also an expert on LCA, it depends always what type of assumptions and information you use for this modeling. In a way, of course, if you talk about trees coming from, let's say Nordic dimensions or our trees or forest and viscose, then it sounds quite nice and interesting, but it depends on the impact category you take into account. So usually you take several impact categories, you don't get one answer. So you have to really balance, which is more important in this. But that's why LCA doesn't give you, very clear answer always. But when it comes to the textiles, then of course, synthetic textiles, it depends on the design still. I would say that the polyethylene or something like that, polyester, in terms of being a major polymer when it comes to fiber production, then it depends on how you do the recycling at the end of the life cycle, or let's say the end stage. So at the moment, the main problem is that the textile is produced out of different fibers, and this makes it the most difficult to recycle. So you don't have really good material at the end. So most probably you have to do really a downcycling, which doesn't give you too much possibilities to have, the highest or the best outcome. So I would say the bottle-to-bottle or garment-to-garment recycling is always in the hierarchy the best option. So from the design point of view, you have to aim for that first, and then to see what are the alternatives. But the materials play important role. So you have to really make an easy and in a way the best kind of choice. And I would say monomaterials are the ones which should be the future when it comes to whatever product.
And whatever type of fiber, as long as it's just this one fiber. Is that?
Yeah, so basically in the future, I would say where it seems the whole design goes, it is viscose and monomaterial. So there are many, many nice research done in Nordic countries, which shows that you can recycle viscose almost endlessly. So this is definitely a good point, but now you really need a kind of input from designers so that you really design something that it's possible to recycle also. At the moment, it's very, very difficult to recycle garments because of the components and materials mixed together. The same for plastics, but or let's say packaging. But packaging is, as we heard, still relatively easy product. But when it comes to electronics and more complex products, then it is even more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, this has been awesome. Thank you so much also for saying longer. I think we're gonna save some of our energy for next month. What do you guys think? Thank you, Joel, also for participating. And let's wrap up for today. Let's free the internet lines. There's still sun outside and the summer has not quite ended yet. So thank you so much for coming and asking questions and sharing your thoughts. Till next time.
Thank you.